Hey, what's up, guys? Isaiah from Hot Tag Wrestling, and today I'm coming at you with the first video in the new series, Tournamentality. Easily the worst name for any video series ever, but here we are. I released a video earlier today just giving a brief overview of what this series is going to be focused on, so I'm not going to go over that too much, but essentially I am looking for the greatest pro wrestling tournament of all time, and I'm starting today with King of the Ring 1993. Though it's not the first King of the Ring tournament, it is the first King of the Ring pay-per-view, and it has this special distinction of every match from the quarters to the semis to the finals all happening on the same night. 6 tournament matches in total happen on the same pay-per-view, and in later years, they would sort of play with this format for King of the Ring pay-per-view, sometime only doing the semifinals while doing the quarterfinals on TV, or this year in 2024, they just did the finals of Gunther versus Randy Orton at the pay-per-view, and everything else was on TV. And I'm going to talk about it more after I go through the matches, but having all 3 series of rounds on the same card really does a good job to inform the audience of the full story of the tournament in one compact package. And I feel that for a single elimination tournament like this, where you only have 8 guys in it, this really is the proper way to do it. And I really like this tournament. The pay-per-view overall, not great, but the tournament itself and the stories that it told within that, absolutely fantastic. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through each of the 6 tournament matches. I'm ignoring the other matches, which is good because Hulk Hogan and Yokozuna have a match on this card that's absolutely atrocious. But I'm just going to be focused on the tournament matches, and I'm going to be giving my overall thoughts on each match and just a brief overview of what happened before at the end giving my recap overall. And at the end of this video, I am going to be comparing this match to the G1 Climax 34, which I've released previous videos on, and just seeing how it compares. But with that, let's get into the first quarterfinal match. So the first match on the card was a quarterfinal match pitting Bret Hart versus Razor Ramon. And in terms of the opening match of a tournament, it doesn't get much better than these two. And though they didn't have like a great blowaway match because they only had about 10 minutes in the ring together, and one of these 2 gentlemen, spoiler, it's Bret Hart, he would have to go on to wrestle 2 more very long matches over the course of the night. They didn't really go full hog on it, but it was just a very good match to open the card, and it especially did a good job of introducing the story that Bret Hart would be telling over the course of the night, of him in these really long, really competitive, hyper-physical matches with really good wrestlers. Because there's a lot of wrestlers in this tournament, like Lex Luger and Mr. Hughes and Tatanka, where if Bret got pitted against them, he wouldn't be able to tell the same story of him going up in these highly competitive work rate kind of matches. So putting him against Razor Ramon in the first round was a very good idea, even though they didn't have the most amazing match you've ever seen. And after that, we got Mr. Perfect versus Mr. Hughes, which was, like, it was good. It was fine. It was only really, though, made good because Mr. Perfect is just absolutely incredible. And him going up against Mr. Hughes, if you've never heard of Mr. Hughes, I wouldn't put it past you, because he was sort of a flash in the pan in the mid-90s who sort of appeared in, like, different promotions. And he was a big guy, but there was nothing really to him. He wasn't a big guy in the sense like Yokozuna or Bam Bam Bigelow were big guys, nor was he a giant like Undertaker or Diesel or Kane. He just sort of was in the middle and didn't really have an aura about him, and he wasn't very good of a worker, and that sort of translates to this match, and all the entertainment is brought by Mr. Perfect, who is an excellent bumper and an even better seller, and he really puts it on in this match. And The match did have like this whack-ass DQ finish that was just really no good. And it was no good because it's not even like Mr. Perfect got injured in it. Like, Mr. Hughes just smacked him with the urn that he had stolen from The Undertaker on Superstars or whatever. And then Mr. Perfect just rolled out of the ring and he was fine. And it's not like that injury spot plagued him for the rest of the tournament. So it was just a bad finish and didn't really accomplish anything other than pushing Mr. Perfect through to face Bret Hart in the next round. So pretty nothing match. And if you want to talk about nothing matches, buckle up because we got 2 more coming. Bam Bam Bigelow versus Hacksaw Jim Duggan was next. Went about 5 minutes. You know, Hacksaw in 1993, nothing really to write home about. Doesn't have a lot going. It's mainly him just going, ho, and then like shaking his arms about like he does and doing bear hugs and stuff, but nothing really good here. And also the story that they were trying to tell with Bam Bam wasn't properly set up in this match, because the story of the tournament was Bam Bam is this unbeatable giant, and spoiler, he gets a bye in the second round, so he only has to wrestle 2 matches on the night, whereas Bret Hart has to wrestle 3. So having him like sort of 50-50, I wouldn't even call it 50-50. He sort of takes the brunt of the defense against Jim Duggan in this match. It doesn't make sense. And like, why would you do that? Are you trying to protect Jim Duggan? Because it's 1993. He's not doing anything else of significance. You know, granted, he wrestled for a lot longer after this, but he was never a main event concern. He was never even like top of the mid card after this. So it doesn't really make sense why Bam Bam took so much of his offense and didn't just kill him in like a minute or 2 minutes, which would have served the story that he told in this tournament so much better. Really skippable match, didn't serve the story of the tournament at all. And the final quarterfinal match was Lex Luger versus Tatanka. And this match had really good booking going into it. Tatanka, undefeated. Lex Luger, since jumping from WCW to WWF, undefeated. And they are now going up in the first round of this tournament. Undefeated streak versus undefeated streak. How could it possibly happen that one of these guys is going to go down? And it turns out they don't. They get to a 15-minute time limit draw, which allows Bam Bam the bye in the second round. And that's such an awesome story beat. It's really, really cool. So both of these guys seem like unbeatable monsters, and Bam Bam gets to skip the second round and be this fresh monster coming up against whichever babyface has to face him in the final round. So it's a really good, unique piece of storytelling that only really works in the tournament format. The match was bad, though. Like, that is the thing. It's a great idea on paper, but then you realize it's Lex Luger and Tatanka in the ring. And while both guys can be good when matched up against the right opponents, these were not the right opponents. It really was a boring match. It was a lot, and I mean a lot, of rest holds throughout this match, and it just wasn't good. Wasn't entertaining, pretty boring. So it was a really good idea on paper, executed very, very poorly. So as we get into the semifinals, we only have one semifinal match because, as I said, since Lex Luger and Tatanka went to a 15-minute time limit draw, Bam Bam Bigelow automatically gets a bye into the finals. And that does 2 really interesting things for our semifinal match. Firstly, it says that if this match were to go to a time limit draw, which the time limit is increased to 30 minutes, then Bam Bam would automatically be the winner. He would not even have to face anyone in the finals. He would automatically be the winner. And also, it says that if these two go out and have a long and very competitive match, which they eventually did, they now have to go back and face Bam Bam Bigelow, who's only wrestled for 5 minutes in one match. And it created a really interesting dynamic. So the match we're talking about is Bret Hart versus Mr. Perfect, which is easily the match of the tournament. And if you put this match on any card from the 90s, or even if you put this match on any WWE card today, it would easily be the best match on that card. This match was absolutely phenomenal. And as an analyst, there's not a lot I can say about a match between two wrestlers of this caliber other than it's fantastic. Because I would just be repeating, the selling, perfect. The bumping, perfect. The psychology, perfect. The comeback from Bret Hart, perfect. The heel work from Mr. Perfect, perfect. Like, there's not a lot I can really say about how awesome this match was. Because along with Shawn Michaels in the mid-90s, if you were just going to throw a wrestler out there to have a great match, you would pick Bret Hart or Mr. Perfect. So bringing those two together, you're guaranteed an amazing match. And these guys were running back a match they had at SummerSlam 2 years ago in 1991. And though this match had much less of the pomp and circumstance the first match did, I feel that this match might be equal or better to that match in terms of quality. There's a unique story about both guys going in babyface, but Mr. Perfect slowly working more and more of a heel style over the course of the match and really working over Bret Hart. And both guys, towards the end of the match, really working at sort of a pace that says, oh shit, I gotta face Bam Bam Bigelow in the next round. I gotta get this over quick. But they don't. They just have like this 20-minute banger match where everything is executed really flawlessly. And it's one of those matches that sort of functions in a time capsule where it's fun to go back and watch as sort of like a little bit of nostalgia, like, oh, this is what wrestling used to be. But also, you still can really enjoy it. There were some parts in this match when I really got into it. Like, when at one point, Mr. Perfect's going for the perfect plex, but Bret Hart reverses it and does the suplex spot over the top rope. And though you've seen that a bunch of times, commentary really sells it and makes you believe that there's going to be a double count out or that this match might not go to a finish and Bam Bam would win. And it just told such a great confined story. On top of that, when Bret Hart eventually does win, it factors into his tournament-long story as a whole, because he had a very competitive match in the first round with Razor Ramon that went about 10 minutes, and now he had this 20-minute absolute war with Mr. Perfect. So he has wrestled for 30 minutes against two highly competitive athletes, and he is now going against in a basically fresh Bam Bam Bigelow. And it would be hard to beat Bam Bam Bigelow if you were coming out fresh and it was your best day and you were fully prepared. But having gone 30 minutes, having your hand worked over, having your ribs worked over, now going to have to face this behemoth, it told such an awesome story going into the finals. So now we're to the finals, Bret Hart versus Bam Bam Bigelow. And though this match really didn't have a chance of matching up to the greatness that was Bret Hart versus Mr. Perfect, they really tried. They had a surprisingly great match. And it had the dynamic going into it of Bret Hart having wrestled for 30 minutes, Bam Bam for only 5. So Bam Bam was much fresher and more dominant. He pretty much dominated the match. But he was able to strike a very nice balance of being able to be the ass beater giant heel working over the babyface, but do it in a way that's entertaining and holds the audience's interest for the entirety of the match. And similarly, Bret Hart did an all-timer job here of playing the underdog come-from-behind babyface. And really, those two dynamics worked beautifully together, and it created a really, really great match. And I feel like this would be one of those sort of hidden gem, unsung greats from the new generation, had it not been for some stupid booking decisions made in it. Like, towards the back half of the match, I would say in the second half, Bret Hart was on the outside selling his back after Bam Bam did some great offense of throwing him into the ring post and really like throwing him into it. It looked like a bad bump. And then power slamming him onto the outside. Then he was distracting the ref in the ring, and Luna Vachon came out and hit Bret Hart with one of the weakest looking chair shots I've ever seen in my life. And he gets back in the ring, Bam Bam hits the diving headbutt, and then wins King of the Ring. And I was like, oh, that's super weird. That's a weird way to end the match. But then Earl Hebner comes out and he says, no, he got hit with a chair. This match has to be restarted. And I can see what they're going for, just really trying to make it seem like the deck is stacked against Bret Hart as much as possible. But there was a way to do it other than this. Having Luna Vachon come out and hit him with a chair is fine, and then having Bam Bam hit him with a big move, but have Bret kick out. Really make him seem like this resilient babyface who doesn't need to get saved by the officials, who can do it by himself, and who can be the outlasting hero that we want him to be. But other than that, the two worked really well together. Bret eventually did win, and I'm going to talk about in a little bit how that story worked through the tournament, but Bret really was the right winner for this tournament. I could definitely see what they would do if Bam Bam had won, and I think Bam Bam would have made an interesting King of the Ring if not for the fact that Yokozuna was WWF champion at the time, so it would have been Bam Bam versus Yoko, which just would not have been a good match. So really, going into this, it was going to be Bret Hart or Mr. Perfect, and I think that giving it to Hart and elevating him up that little much more on his road to finally beating Yokozuna at WrestleMania 10, very good decision, great winner, and he told a great story throughout the tournament. So my overall thoughts on the tournament, it was great booking let down by some middling action, which when you talk about WWE or WWF, it's normally the opposite, like bad booking that's made up for by great in-ring action. But that wasn't the case here. The story of Bret Hart throughout this tournament, wrestling about 50 minutes over the course of the night, going up against a great worker in Razor Ramon, a super worker in Mr. Perfect, and then having to topple the giant of Bam Bam Bigelow, is such a great story to putting over the resilience of your top babyface. And like I said, I think that the restarting of the match in the finals, as well as Bam Bam's first round match, sort of undermined that a little bit. I feel like overall, it really told an effective story. And if you had never seen Bret Hart wrestle before, coming into this tournament, you would have been the biggest Bret Hart fan in the world. Because even if all the matches weren't great, Bret Hart's matches were the highlights of the card. All three of his matches were the best matches on this card, and especially his one with Mr. Perfect is an all-timer. And though you could make the argument for it being a little too predictable and maybe at some points boring, I disagree for that. I feel focusing so heavily on Bret and focusing the entire thing around Bret versus a bunch of little mini stories told in there is the way to go, especially in this first tournament, because you were able to tell some other stories like Tatanka and Luger going to a time limit, or Mr. Perfect slowly turning heel over the course of the tournament. The main focus being on Bret really worked to create this long-running story for fans both in the arena and watching on pay-per-view to get invested in. And when you have a single night tournament like this, that's really what it's supposed to be about. And this match really made me a fan of single night tournaments where all the matches happen on the same night. And I thought going into it that I really wouldn't like that, but sort of going beat by beat by beat on the same night and seeing the wear and tear that Bret Hart went through and seeing him going up against the fresh-faced Bam Bam at the end, it created such an interesting and unique story that it completely sold me on the idea. And I'm excited to go back and watch tournaments like this now, like the other King of the Rings or like WrestleMania 4 for the WWF Championship. I'm excited to go back and watch those tournaments now because this tournament did such a good job on selling me on it. Comparing it to G1 Climax 34, as these are the only 2 tournaments we have in the race so far. I feel like even though I loved Bret Hart's story in this, it can't quite match up to G1 Climax 34, because that tournament not only had great stories like Takeshita and Yota Tsuji and Zack Sabre Jr. and Shingo, but also it had the great matches. It had multiple matches in the 4.5 to 4 3/4 star range, whereas this card only really had one great match on it, that being Hart versus Perfect. So I feel like the G1 34 does get the nod for that. And it might be a little bit unfair because this tournament only had 6 matches, whereas the G1 has like 80. I don't know. I just don't think, even if you just took like a selection of 6 matches from the G1, I do feel that the stories are better, the action is better, because even though you have some whatever talent in the G1 34, you know, like Great O'Khan and Jake Lee and Tetsuya Naito and Ren Narita, overall most of the talent is great and entertaining to watch. And in this tournament, in the King of the Ring 1993, only about half of the competitors are really worth investing in, that being Bret Hart, Bam Bam Bigelow, Mr. Perfect, and Razor Ramon. And other than that, like, the other guys are sort of just there to make up the numbers. So I do rank King of the Ring 1993 below G1 Climax 34. And those are my thoughts on King of the Ring 1993 for this first video in the Tournamentality series. Easily the worst name in all of YouTube. Let me know what you guys thought down in the comments if anyone watches this video. I assume no one will. Let me know if you agreed with my opinion, if you think that this tournament is better or worse than G1 Climax 34. And let me know if there are any other tournaments you think that I should go back and watch. I'm planning on doing Cruiserweight Classic. I want to do the AEW TNT Championship Tournament from 2019. I want to do a PWG Battle of Los Angeles. And I am currently going through and watching the G1 Climax from 2017. But it's a long process to watch all those matches, so that video probably won't come out for a good period of time. But if you like this series, if you like the concept, let me know. I'm hoping to continue to produce more videos like this in the future. I have been Isaiah from Hot Tag Wrestling. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.